New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we'll be exploring war and philosophy. With me is philosopher Pierre Grimes, who is the author of Philosophical Midwifery. He is also the author of Socrates and Jesus, a dialogue made in heaven, plus many other books. In addition, Pierre is the founder of the Noetic Society, and he is a combat veteran of the Second World War. Welcome, Pierre.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Now, I know you experienced quite a bit of combat during the Second World War. Before you really initiated your career as a philosopher.
Yes.
But I think this is a good time to look back on those years and to reflect from the vantage of many decades of doing philosophical work, what we can say about wartime experience.
Well, let me first say that this is a rare event. I haven't done such a thing as recollect publicly my war experiences. Mm-hmm. So I accept the challenge and enjoy the moment to reflect upon this. I volunteered at 18. I had to wait for my 18th birthday in order to volunteer. My mother was holding me back. I volunteered originally for the paratroopers, but I went through early training, and subsequently, there must have been the occasion for innumerable casualties somewhere, since right after our 3 months training, they said, everything has changed. We're going. And I said, okay. So the unit I was with, they broke up, and we became replacements for casualties in Italy. Mm-hmm. So, North Africa. Got to North Africa, went to Tunis, Bizerti, and then took a very short battlecraft to get to Italy. They were fighting just north of Italy when I joined them. When I joined them, they gave us a choice between joining the Rangers and the 36th Division. And the group of people I was with, we said, well, where's the action going? And they said, well, the 36th Division is on the front. Yep. You'll have to go through training to be on the Rangers. And we said, oh, no, we'll go up on the front.
So from the very outset of the war, you volunteered and you were eager for action.
Yeah. Well, it was a war.
Well, there are many wars that we've had subsequently, and I think it's fair to say that the population was much more behind the Second World War than subsequent wars have been much more controversial.
That's true. That's the major difference, other than the Korean War. Mm-hmm. All of the post-wars since then have been manufactured by politicians. There was no real reason to go into combat in the subsequent wars. That's all fraud.
Well, of course, that's up for debate, I suppose. There will be people who will argue on both sides. But in any case...
there was no threat to us personally from these subsequent wars.
Well, people would make the same argument about the Second World War. It's a European problem.
Well, you see, at that time...
in fact, until Pearl Harbor, we stayed out.
Well, that's true. The American First Movement was a strong anti-war movement in the United States. We only got the draft passed by one vote in those days.
Oh.
So there was an opposition to it, a reluctance.
Yeah. But you didn't feel that opposition.
No. We were living in New York, and I knew people. Some of them volunteered for the Spanish Civil War and that American Legion. So we lived under the threat of Nazism conquering the war and bringing along with it all the terrible destruction that followed the tyranny of Nazi Germany. So there wasn't much of a debate on my part. I knew there was a fight. I had to get into it, so I went ahead with it.
Okay, because I do know in the United States, well, I'm from Wisconsin, there were many German sympathizers.
Sure. Yes, I agree. But that didn't affect me.
That didn't affect. At that time, your belief was that you were enlisting in order to fight evil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I got to Italy, I joined the 36th Division. I became an infantryman in the Company C and 142nd Regiment. And the moment we were going up to the front, I was already signed. Even though I didn't have the background as a rifleman, I was trained as an S2, which is a 7-man unit that does essential, what they called intelligence work, which essentially was to find an outpost where you can observe direct artillery, mortar fire, and spot troop movements. And that was our job, finding a place to...
So you could direct the mortar fire.
Oh, yeah, that was... Yeah. So I was tapped on the shoulder just as we literally went up to the front lines. They said, "Hey, there's a guy that just got killed in the S2 unit. You're an S2 man, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." So they became part of the S2. So then we went through the war. I went through...
put you right on the front lines.
Oh, yeah. There was no one in front of me except a couple of riflemen, and sometimes we were together.
So you're watching mortar fire right over your head.
Oh, yeah.
And helping to direct it.
That's true. Yeah. And then we went to Anzio, did that battle. We were pulled back.
That was a very bloody battle, was it not?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a large percentage of troops were lost in battle at Anzio.
The unit I was with, the 36th Division, went through what was called the Rapido River crossing, where they lost in 2 regiments over 80% of the men through an absurd attack in the middle of a raging river, trying to cross it against strong German positions.
Some officer directed you to do that. Yeah,
some general who didn't know what he was doing. See, a National Guard unit wasn't trained for combat. They were trained for social purposes in the United States.
You were in the National Guard initially?
And that was a National Guard unit.
When you volunteered as a paratrooper, that was National Guard?
No. I never got into that because they, as I just said, they just put us quickly on board. After I finished the 90 days, they put me on a boat and sent me to Africa. That ended that.
Yeah.
But then I made the Anzio invasion. Not actually the invasion, we came after it was open. And my unit was the unit that broke through the German lines and did quite a brilliant maneuver. We found a hole in the German lines, and the word went back if you found a hole in the German lines. You see, whenever troops are on the line and they pull back a unit, there's a hole there in a moment. They have to fill it quickly with the new troops. There was a hole in the German unit. And so quickly the word went back, and subsequently I heard that I was in this unit, and they said, "Look here, if you can get a platoon through that, you can get a company through that." And someone went further and said, "If you can get a company through that hole, why not sneak a battalion through?" So sure enough, my unit was one of the units that led the group all night long.
Yeah.
And by the way, the rule was you weren't allowed to put a bullet in the chamber of your rifle or whatever you were carrying. It was because they were afraid that if anyone were to start shooting, it would disclose the fact that we were behind German lines.
Okay, so you went behind German lines without loaded weapons.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we worked our way all the way at night, and there was a machine gun that was there, and subsequently a group of my friends knocked it out, and I was going along, and we finally got up to the top and dug in, waiting for the morning, in order to get a little bit of revenge on the Rapido fiasco that we suffered. So the troops just dug in and waited for the morning, and then fired away on the Germans, who were then embattled right at the base of the mountain.
In other words, you had surrounded them, and they didn't realize.
Yeah, right. It was the next morning. So, in any case, there was a lot of action there, and I played a nice role in it. Then from that breakthrough, that was a breakthrough that was simultaneous with the British had a breakthrough further north, and that created the opening into the opening of Rome. Then the opening of Rome came, which was hilarious. It took about 8 hours to go through that. Everyone was delirious with happiness. But unfortunately, the general didn't have enough brains to say, that's a waste of men and equipment, and we should have blocked Highway 6, where the Germans were using to retreat from the south. So that was, in any case. Then we went north, and then we got pulled back to Naples, south of Naples, Paestum, to do the training for the invasion of southern France. And so I was in the invasion of France. The first wave, third boat, landed. And by the way, that was really quite remarkable, because the Germans, where they thought we would land, which normally we would land on a beach, what they did is they brought up, I don't know how many at this point, but maybe 20, 25 or even more, flat ships with nothing but rockets, hundreds of rockets, and they directed it all at just 100 yards. And that pulverized a rock pile. But we just waited, and right there came around and got the Germans, who were suspecting.
They didn't think you'd come in through a rock pile.
Right. We came through a rock pile instead of big rocks that would have blocked the invasion.
Yeah.
And they had paratroopers, and there was actually, there were more, from what I heard, there were more troops, more ships than for the European invasion, and a much more successful paratroop drop.
Yeah.
It was executed with great brilliance.
So with regard to the orders that you were directed to follow, there were some disastrous orders, and there were some brilliant ones.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Fortunately for you, the brilliant tactical and strategic decisions outweighed the disastrous.
Right. So, like in southern France, we got a Jeep, and we put a light machine gun up on the right, and we'd go like hell, and because the Germans were retreating, and we'd try to find them. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Then we got to the Vosges Mountains, and that was a bloody battle in northern France. Made the breakthrough into Germany and chased the Germans. And my mother was right.
Tell us what your mother said.
My mother said, she said, "Watch, Pierre, if you ever get into Germany, they'll surrender along the way. They don't want the destruction of their own people."
And of course, we bombed some German cities very heavily.
Oh, yeah. When you went through bombed cities, you know what the Air Force did.
Yeah.
But the small towns and villages, they just hung out all of their white sheets. And so we just went through and had a couple of skirmishes. Then opened up 2 concentration camps. Actually, not opened up. We followed I think it was the third division, literally, that opened it up. We followed them since we were pushing to take the last mountain where the Germans held royalty and guarded by the SS during the war. It was our jobs to run up that mountain and open it up. And so it was rather dangerous because very steep. It was going to be pretty heavy casualties. And so my unit, I was going along with the heavy machine gun unit, and the guy patted me on the shoulder and said, "Hold it." And there was an officer. And by the way, officers often didn't attend my unit. I went for 3 years in the war, and I only saw the lieutenant in charge of my unit probably no more than 2 times.
But you would receive orders nonetheless.
Yeah, you get from some higher sergeant, but I was pretty much autonomous. And what saved my life, I think, is that I always tried to make sure that whatever place I grabbed for an observation, there was always a good way to get out. Go in and go out, be careful.
You were looking for an exit. That was even more important than finding a location with a strategic or tactical advantage.
Right. So through it all, I got hit once, got a Purple Heart. I ended up with 2 Bronze Star and Oak Leaf Cluster for heroism and Anzio. I got a couple of guys together, and we went on a patrol without being asked. And we were lucky enough to run into a German patrol, knocked a couple of them out, and then brought the prisoners back, and they thought that was good enough for giving a medal. And then in Europe, there were a couple of things that happened, and much to my surprise, I got an Oak Leaf Cluster for that too. But when I got that tap from that officer, he said, "The war's over, Pierre."
Just as you thought you were about to...
Just going up that hill, we were on our way.
It would have been a very dangerous situation.
Another one, yeah.
Well, in some of our earlier conversations, I got the impression that during the war, you're fighting the Germans, primarily. The attitude that the American soldiers had toward the Germans, I think you described it as there's no such thing as a good German.
That's true. Yeah. See, it's a question of injustice, and really, even though it's a curious word, to see what those people did during World War II was so disastrous that, and then when you realize that the entire German population was behind this man.
And yet you're talking about a high culture. Germany, I mean, as a philosopher, surely you know Germany is the nation of Kant and Goethe and Schiller and Heinrich Heine. These are very cultured people.
Yeah. See, what's curious about the Germans, as my experience is, they're fierce fighters. But what's most interesting to me about World War II and my own private little experience is that we made so many mistakes in the beginning. And then suddenly things changed. Then they started making mistakes, and we didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened, but what I found really amazing is that when we got into Germany, suddenly these fierce warriors had come out with a white flag. And I'd say to myself, "You're now passive? You're now passive after all of this terrible war? You now want to be forgiven? What the hell is going on?" Like, a good number of them were even transported to the United States, and they kept them in prison camp, prisoner of war camps. But they suddenly became docile, nice little Germans.
Yeah.
And then like anybody, we can become fascists. Any country can turn tyrannical in their history.
Mm-hmm.
They turn tyrannical. Whatever nation becomes tyrannical is the epitome of injustice. And people who have some sense of justice are going to fight it.
Well, you know, I think sometimes of Jesus as a philosopher. And Jesus once said, you have read an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you no. If a man strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek.
Yeah, I heard that. And I know many people probably died as a consequence and allowed these tyrants freedom to rape the earth and destroy mankind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree. I think where you see injustice, you have to take a stand.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever there is a tyrant is just someone who's going to act out in their own life and in their country as a ruler injustice.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens, people who have some sense of justice have to enter into combat against them. They have to stop them.
Well, the counter-argument to that, and I think maybe the case of the Spanish Civil War might be an example, where people say, you know, any society, even a tyrannical one, eventually will become more liberal. So, yes, the fascists won in Spain, but today Spain is a liberal democracy.
Well, it's a liberal democracy because they couldn't continue their fascistic rule after Adolf ended. They had to then relax their ridiculous fascism.
Well, Franco, the dictator in Spain, stayed in power into the 1970s, as I recall.
Sure.
So, but eventually, things liberalized.
Yeah,
and even during Franco's reign, I mean, people don't accuse the Spanish after the Civil War of engaging in atrocities.
See, I look at it differently. There is a tyranny. Now, what do we mean by tyranny? We mean that if you find people who are living a open, free society, and someone then imposes their will upon them, making them servants to serve their desire and their goals, they have to give up their freedom to become the means to satisfy a ruler who acts tyrannically.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, that happens in the families as well.
Mm-hmm.
The pathologos is nothing other than the imposition on a family of an unjust act that transforms the family so that the leader, the person who's doing this, becomes the powerful member in the family that dictates what goals and what procedures must necessarily followed at the risk of exile.
Mm-hmm. Now, for the benefit of our viewers,
injustice.
For the benefit of our viewers who haven't watched our previous interviews, we better define that term pathologos.
Okay.
It's something you coined.
That's true. I have found that the major difficulty mankind has is when they subsume for themselves a false image of themselves. That is, a sick belief of themselves, a pathologos.
Mm-hmm.
That only can occur when a child is young in an open and free state, and the parent looks upon them and sees that may run the risk, that freedom they're exhibiting may challenge the family and their direction, or it may allow them to become vulnerable to others since they're now open and free. So there's a fear of freedom and a sense of protection. So they impose upon their child their fears.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pathologos. Then they become the ruler. Their act is unjust. The child now has to give up that freedom state and become a servile servant with playing the role that's given to them as a result of that transition to play a member of the role in the family.
Mm-hmm.
That's why in our work with philosophical midwifery, one of the principles is when you finally understand the injustice that was done to you, you regain that early freedom, but you still have one more step. You have to tell the person who imposed that, or find a substitute for them. You have to tell them what they did, that you suffered injustice from them. It has cost you many things in your life since you gave up your real goals when you were in a state of freedom. You have to tell them. See, you have to challenge them. You have to share what it's been in order to be free. That's regaining the logos. See, you gave up your vision. See? That means you now fell in a world of belief. You got to get out of belief.
So you're saying the same dynamic that occurs in families.
Yes, same thing.
That causes dysfunction is what results in authoritarian dictatorships and tyrannical governments that lead to war.
What we need to do is to look at the upbringing, the early experience in terms of philosophical midwifery of Trump. What made him to be the way he is? Why is it that many people are following him? Is it likely the people that are following him have been subjected to something similar in their own home? You're
talking about the current president of the United States. And of course, my hope is that this program will be broadcast 100 years from now. So we're going for timeless truths. But the principle that I see operating here, and I want to come back to this, is that why did Jesus say turn the other cheek? Wasn't it because when you oppose let's say, fascism, a tyrant, you become like that tyrant. You're forced to destroy the tyrant, and in so doing, you become tyrannical yourself.
I never became tyrannical.
But maybe not you as an individual.
No, but the people that I was around never became tyrannical. We never imposed a harsh and tyrannical system on the Germans. No.
Well, we did have a conversation a little earlier about an obscure book published in Canada. No American publisher would touch it, called Other Losses, which suggests that after the war had ended in Europe, General Eisenhower took into custody the entire German army, and according to Pentagon statistics, there's a little phrase. The book is called Other Losses, and that's what the Pentagon statistics suggest, that 750,000 German soldiers taken into custody by the U.S. Army somehow never returned to their families.
Well, you see,
that sounds like, potentially, I don't know if it's true, but it seems well documented. Sounds like an atrocity on our side. And people, Americans tend to cover up atrocities as well.
Oh, certainly. Civil War, slavery, the American Indians, what we've done to American Indians.
So to say that, our country doesn't have fascist tendencies, that we're all good, we're the good guys, and everyone else, our enemies are the bad guys, is a little misleading, wouldn't you say?
I certainly do, because nations can go up and down and respond to different challenges in their history. They don't continue as a result of this or that event, a permanent change in their character. Oh, by the way, I hope those 750,000 Germans, if that was the group, I think it would be a nice thing for them to see that would lead them to war, the madness following a madman, like following Trump as a madman, to give your allegiance to madmen. At the end of your life, you have to face what you've done, and I hope that gave that 750,000 Germans an opportunity to face their fate and realize the absurdity of following a monster like Adolf. And therefore, they can perhaps go into the next world benefiting by that experience. I'm not saying it wasn't an atrocity. Certainly, Russia did the same thing. With the fall of Stalingrad, they took the 750,000 Germans, and very few ever survived. They took them on a long walk, and they all perished. So
there are many
war
examples.
Is atrocity.
Well, that's a point that's a point that William James, one of my philosophical heroes, has made. War is atrocious. Everybody knows that the suffering is unbelievable that war causes.
But in spite of that, I would say, on the contrary, it's absolutely necessary. You have to face evil. You have to face injustice. You have to oppose it. You have to use your life in order to fight it. That there's no better fight than to fight an unjust cause. I think that's all. By the way, Socrates was the same. Arjuna, though for other reasons. But certainly, these men saw the need to fight, to defend. They, too, had to make some kind of a decision similar to what we're doing, what we're saying.
Well, as you know, I'm a pacifist, and I realize that puts me in a minority. I don't expect everybody to hold the pacifist position, but I do think that if the human species is ever going to evolve to the point where we can take our place in the community of the cosmos itself, we're going to have to put a lot of our pettiness and self-destructive behaviors behind us.
I would say what we need to do is to realize that the noblest idea is the self.
Mm-hmm.
The recognition of that, and to make philosophical midwifery and the way in which it proceeds to deal with family injustices should become available to everyone. Is it not interesting that I read an autobiography, the author escapes me at the moment, but he did a beautiful biography of Stalin.
Mm.
Much to my surprise, Stalin's family, his father was a drunk who used to beat his mother and his son.
Joseph Stalin.
Yeah, right. They put him in a monastery when he was 8.
Yeah.
And the way that master priest controlled that monastery became the model of how Joseph Stalin ruled Russia.
I see.
With spies, with informers, that whole way in which he learned his own civic lesson in that kind of an atmosphere. And that became the very model that he used in Russia.
It suggests, it reinforces the biblical quote, the evil that you do will pass on for 7 generations.
I would say, see, what that shows, though, is that we have to realize that when we allow families to act unjustly to their children, we are going to pay the consequences socially for every one of those families. Therefore, we have to decide that the most important thing in education is to bring about an understanding of the noble idea of the self and the problems that invariably are going to take place when the imposition of a pathologos, because that's unjust.
But if we don't allow families to go their own way, unjust as it is, one might say that we're micromanaging. I mean, for example, with other nations, we form friendly relationships with other nations that are very tyrannical toward their own people. And we do that for strategic reasons. I mean, it's one of the problems that we're seeing now with the, as I understand it, in the Arab world, where women are oppressed, where gay people are oppressed, where actually citizens are treated in very rigid ways. And as a consequence, we see all of this turmoil, terrorism, coming from that part of the world and affecting us.
See, the problem of injustice is also in the working world. But like, we are in a corporate structure that serves its own purpose for profit at the cost of workers, at the cost of society. That's an injustice. We have to face that, and that's what Bernie Sanders is doing. And that's what I see as a new movement politically taking place. We're going to change that. The people who
that's
see
not
that...
new. I mean, that's socialism, is it not?
I don't... What name?
Well, I'm just suggesting, number one, it's not new, and number two, I hope we stay away from contemporary politics, because we'll miss the larger philosophical point.
Well, but it's still the problem of injustice.
Yes, that's the real problem.
That's the problem, because I'm just pointing out where you see it.
Yeah.
Are we obliged to act responsibly when we see injustice, to act in...
Yeah.
That's the issue, wherever it is.
That's the point you're making.
That's the point I'm making.
Okay, let me go back now to another point I want to get into. When you were in combat, my understanding is that you had told the members of the team, the S2 unit you were working with, that as far as you were concerned, you were already dead.
Yeah.
Let's explain that.
Well, you see, one of the difficulties in combat is the people have to realize that they are going to be in a fearful situation. They're going to experience fear. But you also have to realize that you're harboring some hope for your own survival, maybe at the cost of the unit you're with. Well, I worked with a small group of people. Our lives were interrelated.
Yeah.
So I say to them, look here, we're all going to face fear. Why don't you just say to yourself, look here, in this crazy war, your chances of survival are practically zero. So accept your death now. Let's go back into combat and do a good job. That's all. If you can't do that, you're in the wrong unit.
Well, people would regard that attitude as very noble.
I didn't think it that way, but it seemed practical. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that you were given awards, is for your bravery in the face of combat, in the face of potential death. You were given awards. And another thing that you've mentioned to me is that prior to the age of 18, going through high school, you would describe yourself as, even though today you're a philosopher, back in those days, if I remember, you didn't graduate from high school.
I was kicked out of high school when I was 16. They called me and they said, Pierre, goodbye. I said, thank you. I don't want any part of you.
Yeah. So, I mean, you, like me, have a history of being something of a rebel.
Yeah.
And I think if we look back on your military career, it gave you an opportunity, in effect, to become a man. And as William James points out, the military and war is often honored and celebrated because it does that to men. It gives them a chance to experience heroism, glory, self-sacrifice, things that are highly regarded by society. And you found yourself, receiving medals and having thousands of troops march by and salute you.
Yeah. But I don't know whether I experienced anything like that. It was rather remarkable. Here I had a history of failures, and and I get a medal. And this is a very early part of the war, by the way, and therefore the Bronze Star had a certain value. Later it was somewhat diminished, but to be singled out, you stand there and 15,000 men march in front of you and salute you. That does have an effect. And had to think about that. That's rather curious. Because, I was surprised at the award because I was just doing my job.
Yeah.
And subsequently with the other medal, and my unit also, by the way, got 2 presidential citations for heroism. So, we were into a lot of stuff.
So all of these things are ways in which our culture glorifies the role of the warrior.
I think, for me, culture may do that, but I didn't experience it.
Yeah. Well, but wouldn't you say your life was transformed by your experience in the military?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, William James has argued in his essay on a moral equivalent to war that we've got to find peaceful ways to allow men in particular to achieve these high ideals of self-sacrifice, of discipline, of, what William James, I think, would have called the manly virtues.
I would say it's important to settle your own experience of injustice in your own personal life, and then you are free to create and to live a life that is most free and open to new challenges, and that's where you're going to get your sense of pride in your work and your life.
So I think what you're saying is that when it comes to fighting injustice, it's a good idea not to wait until the situation has become a crisis and leads to war. We need to fight injustices, even small injustices, when we find them every time.
I could not have said it better. I totally agree. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Pierre Grimes. Once again, this has been a delightful conversation, my friend. Thank you so much.
And it is curious to go back over it and look at it again, and I thank you for the chance to do so. It's a rare event for me to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think, there aren't very many veterans of the Second World War left to tell their story.
I noticed that. Isn't that curious?
Yeah. And a lot of people don't appreciate, that was a real war.
Yeah.
Much more to be said about it, and perhaps we'll return to that subject.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre.
My pleasure.
And thank you for being with us.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
You can now download a free PDF copy of issue 7 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine or order a beautiful printed copy.